Multitasking. Well, from experience and psychology testing, we found out that there are two types of categories of distractions that actually sabotage our productivity. One, distraction from outside, in other words, the external environment, and two, distractions from within, in other words, the self-imposed distractions. See, the biggest source of this self-imposed distraction is multitasking. Now, I know this may come as a surprise to some people, since multitasking is still considered as a very highly respectable ability. In fact, I am a good multitasking is a very common thing that people put on their CVs or say in job interviews, and often something people often search for. How do I get better at multitasking? And looking to get better at. But it's actually a curse. Multitasking is a lie and a fallacy that we've been led to believe. In today's training session, I'm going to share with you why multitasking, one, isn't what you really think it is. Two, why in most cases is hugely unproductive and is actually hindering your progress. And three, can be used in a particular way to actually be effective. Now, this is actually the exception to the rule. So let's begin. If you ask someone what multitasking is, they'll tell you that they're working on two or more things at the same time. But actually, that's not the case. Research actually shows that we as human beings cannot actually do two conscious activities at the same time. Not men, not even women. It may very well appear that we are doing two or more things at once, but really we're just switching very quickly between them. So quickly that in split seconds, we think and believe we're actually doing both simultaneously. We're not. What we're really doing is doing one thing, then stopping, then refocusing quickly, then doing the second thing, and back and forth and back and forth. Most of what we consider multitasking should actually be, as researchers have actually shown to be more accurate, referred to as activity switching. Now, to really make this point stick, let's take a look at juggling. To an outside observer, juggling looks like a good example of multitasking. The person is focusing on catching and retossing 2, 3, or 4 balls at once. But that's not the case either. The person is not consciously focusing on all of the balls at once. Rather, they catch and toss one, then quickly switch their attention to the next. And that's how activity switching works in our lives as well. We're doing the things we claim that we're multitasking at the same time, but rather one after another. So let me uncover why this is such a problem for productivity and why it's a form of self-imposed distraction and not a good productivity habit. One study showed that 28% of productive focus is actually wasted on multitasking. And another study about multitasking revealed a 40% drop in efficiency on average. But here's my personal favorite. Another study shows that when someone was multitasking, in other words, activity switching, it was like they just lost 10% of their IQ. That was actually the impact of their work. Now, to some of you, 10% doesn't sound like a lot. Yet that same study showed that when somebody was stoned, on drugs, baked out of their mind, it's like they only lost some 5% of their IQ. So, yes, when you're multitasking, your ability to be productive, efficient, and produce high quality work is actually worse than if you were high. And no, don't get me wrong. This is not a case for drugs that are not bad, but rather that multitasking can actually be such a destructive mode of working. In the same, that driving while texting produces road accidents and deaths on the road. So much so that it's actually been outlawed. We should raise our standard and outlaw activity switching and multitasking for ourselves when working in our own lives. There's actually two real costs to multitasking. One is a drop in quality of work, and two, a drop in efficiency and speed as well. And this is because, especially the second one, because multitasking comes with a price that most of us don't even realize that it comes with. And that, my friends, is the cost of refocusing. So when you're attempting to do multiple things at once, you're actually switching between them. One thing, second thing, back to the first thing. Every time your mind requires a little bit of time to refocus. Not as much as when you're fully distracted, but still some extra time. As a research study by one Dr. David Mayer, this time can be anywhere from around 25% or so for switching between simple tasks, all the way up to 100% or so for more complex tasks. That is a huge, crippling amount for optimal productivity. It means that your tasks, your projects, if you're multitasking, end up 25% through to 100% longer to ultimately complete. That's actually the cost of multitasking, as well as a lowered quality of work as well. And by removing that activity switching gap, you're condensing more focused, effective work into less time, and therefore making more progress in less time. So when you have two tasks or projects or activities at hand, which both require your conscious attention, you're actually better off focusing on one for an extended period of time, completing it ideally, if it's a shorter task, and then moving on to the next, with which that same single-minded focus. So stop multitasking. Cut out the self-imposed distraction. Now, as we said earlier, there is one exception to all of this, and that's unconscious tasks. You see, when you combine one conscious, in other words, that required your conscious thought and bandwidth, with another conscious task, that is activity switching, therefore you suffer all the consequences we just talked about. But when you combine an unconscious task, one that doesn't require conscious thought, with a conscious task, that's actually massive leverage. I'll give you an example. As a runner, if while you're running, which doesn't require conscious thought, you're listening to your voicemails or your voice message, that's great leverage. Or if you're eating breakfast while listening to an audiobook or an audio program, that's massive leverage, as eating breakfast is largely an automatic task. Not entirely, but for the most part. It's mostly an unconscious task that doesn't require your conscious thought most of the time. Or if while you're waiting for a meeting or in the back of a taxi or you're replying to an email or doing a call, that's very effective as well. So if anything, this one exception, when the one thing you're doing is, for the most part, if not entirely, automatic and unconscious, then adding a second task to this is a great use of your time. But attempting to do two conscious tasks at once, switching between them, just brings us back to everything we've just covered before this. It's a fallacy. And it hinders your progress instead of accelerating it. So cut it out. Hope you found this session valuable. If you've got questions, let me know. Comments would be appreciated. Thank you.